You know, usually when we talk about an injury or a trauma, society has this built-in expectation that it's going to be visible. Like, think about a broken arm.
Right, yeah.
You go to the hospital, you look at an x-ray, and there's this stark, jagged white line. A doctor points right at it and says, there is the fracture, there is the problem. It's incredibly clean, it's binary, you're broken, and then you heal.
Well, and it's comforting to the human brain, really. I mean, we are wired to categorize things easily. When we can see the physical damage, a whole social protocol just kicks in automatically.
Yeah, people bring your casseroles, they sign your cast, right?
Exactly. The treatment plan is straightforward, and the empathy is immediate.
But then you step into the world of scam victimization, and suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless. I mean, the financial loss is visible, of course. You can point to a bank statement. But the psychological aftermath, the quiet internal devastation that follows, is completely invisible. And honestly, for the person experiencing it, it is a terrifying, murky landscape to try and navigate.
It really is. The emotional injuries from scams are profound. They often mimic the symptoms of complex PTSD, yet because they're hidden from the outside world, victims are frequently denied that standard social protocol of empathy and support you just mentioned.
And that gap in understanding is exactly why we are here today. Welcome to the Scars Institute Exploration Podcast. We are jumping right into our mission for today, which is to really unpack this painful, hidden psychological aftermath of scams.
Yeah, it's a critical topic.
And we are talking directly to you today. If you're listening to this and you are a survivor of a scam, I need you to hear this loud and clear before we go any further. It was not your fault. You are not alone. And the Scars Institute is here to help you navigate this.
Absolutely. And to do that effectively, we have to look under the hood of what happens after the financial loss. We need to understand the psychological mechanics that play out in the weeks, months, and even years following the event.
Right. And to guide us through that engine room, we're relying on an incredibly insightful piece of writing. It's the article on the Scars Institute Scams Now magazine. And we have to give full credit here. The author is Professor Tim McGuinness, Ph.D. certified in trauma-informed care, recoverologist, anthropologist, scientist, polymath, director of the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, Inc.
That's quite a title, but he brings such a unique lens to this.
He really does. He approaches this from a rigorous clinical perspective, but one that is deeply rooted in human nature and compassion.
And in the article, Professor McGuinness lays out a foundational concept that we are going to trace step by step today. He calls it the loop reinforcement cycle.
The loop reinforcement cycle.
Right. We're going to explore how the external blame you face from society morphs into your own internal shame. And then from there, we'll look at how that internalized shame inevitably erupts back outward, damaging your relationships. But most importantly, we will outline the specific tools you need to break that cycle for good.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very beginning. Because before we can talk about what happens inside your own head, we have to look at the immediate environment a victim steps into once the scam is actually revealed.
Yeah, that initial collision with reality.
Exactly. When you tell your family, your friends, or, I don't know, even law enforcement, the reaction is often shockingly brutal.
Brutal is the right word. Victims frequently hear these incredibly harsh, stinging comments. Someone they love might look right at them and say, how could you fall for that?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Or you should have known better. And in the moment, that feels like a targeted assassination of your intelligence, your judgment, and your character. The financial loss has already turned your world upside down, and then these words from trusted people deepen the injury in a way that feels almost impossible to survive.
It feels like the ultimate betrayal, honestly. Like the people who are supposed to be pulling you out of the quicksand are the ones standing on the edge, telling you that you shouldn't have gone walking in the swamp.
It absolutely feels that way. But what's fascinating here is the underlying psychology behind those comments, because understanding that shifts the entire picture. Professor McGuinness explains that this reaction from your loved ones is rarely born out of actual malice.
Wait, really? It feels like malice.
It does, but it's not. It is, in fact, an instinctual psychological defense mechanism known as the fear of contagion.
The fear of contagion. Okay, so they are subconsciously treating the scam like it's a contagious virus they might catch.
Essentially, yes. Human beings have this deep-seated evolutionary need to believe that the world is a predictable, fair, and safe place. Psychologists sometimes call this the just world fallacy.
Right, the idea that bad things only happen to people who make bad choices.
Exactly. We desperately want to believe that bad things only happen to people who make obvious, avoidable mistakes. So when someone they know, especially someone they respect as smart and capable, falls victim to a sophisticated scam, it completely shatters that illusion of safety.
Oh, I see.
It introduces the terrifying reality that this could happen to anyone. It could happen to them.
So to protect themselves from that sheer terror, they have to invent a reason why it happened to you specifically, just so they can prove to themselves it won't happen to them.
Precisely.
Okay, let's say it's like witnessing a horrible car crash on the highway in the middle of winter.
Hmm.
Instead of accepting that black ice is invisible and unpredictable and could get anyone, the driver passing by immediately criticizes the person in the ditch. They tell themselves, oh, they must have been texting, or, they were driving too fast for the conditions. They do that just to trick their own brain into believing they are safe from the ice.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. By blaming you, they simplify a complex, terrifying reality. If they can point to a supposed flaw in your judgment, they can convince themselves they are insulated from the threat. They reduce their own sudden anxiety by placing the entire burden of the event onto your shoulders.
But, knowing that my brother or my friend is just scared doesn't act like magic, though. If someone says you're foolish, the sting is still there.
Oh, the pain doesn't vanish, no. But understanding the fear of contagion completely shifts your paradigm for interpreting that pain.
How so?
When you realize these comments are driven by someone else's desperate need for self-preservation, you can stop absorbing them as objective truths about your worth.
Yeah.
You can look at the person blaming you and quietly recognize, this reaction isn't actually a referendum on my character. This is a billboard broadcasting your own fear. It creates this crucial millimeter of psychological distance.
Like if we don't create that distance, we slide right into the second phase of Prof. McGuinness's cycle, which is where things get incredibly dangerous, the silent shift.
Yes.
This is where those external attacks breach the hull and basically infect the victim's own mind, right?
We call this the process of blame internalization. When you are repeatedly subjected to these external judgments, your brain acts like a recording device. Over time, those external voices, the ones saying you should have known better, they become automatic, default self-statements.
So you start saying it to yourself.
Exactly. You no longer need the family member in the room to criticize you. Your own mind takes over the job, playing it on a continuous, inescapable loop.
The article highlights a really specific, devastating shift that happens during this internalization. It's the movement from a behavior-based understanding to an identity-based condemnation. Can we break down the difference between those two for the listener?
Absolutely. A behavior-based understanding focuses on an event. Like, I made a mistake. I was manipulated by a professional.
Yeah.
That is an evaluation of an action in a specific moment in time.
Or something that happened.
Exactly. But internalized shame hijacks that narrative. It morphs it into, there is something fundamentally wrong with me. I am a broken, foolish person.
Wow.
That is an evaluation of your core, unchangeable identity.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let me play devil's advocate for the listener who might be thinking, wait, don't I need a little bit of harsh self-reflection? Like, if we completely remove the idea that I made a bad choice, aren't we relieving the lesson? Where's the line between healthy self-reflection and this toxic internalization?
This raises an important question, and it's the exact tension everyone struggles with. Healthy self-reflection is entirely anchored in the behavior. If you view the scam as an action, something that happened in a specific context under highly engineered manipulation, then it is something you can analyze.
You can look at it objectively.
Right. You can identify the red flags you missed, you can learn from them, and you can build stronger defenses. It's productive. But when you view it as an identity flaw, when you believe, I am just a gullible person that feels fixed.
Because if I'm fundamentally flawed by nature, there's no point in trying to build defenses because it's just who I am.
Exactly. And that is how it completely blocks the road to recovery. It creates this persistent, suffocating sense of inadequacy. Furthermore, this internalization alters your actual perception of reality through a mechanism called cognitive filtering.
Cognitive filtering. So your brain essentially rewires itself to anticipate threats everywhere.
Yes. To give you a practical idea of how this works, imagine a victim who is deeply steeped in this internalized shame. They go to their bank just to deposit a normal paycheck. The teller, following standard corporate protocol, asks, "Are you sure you know who you are sending money to today?"
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. To a non-victim, that's just a bank doing its due diligence. But through the cognitive filter of shame, how does that land?
It lands like an indictment. The victim hears the teller saying, I know what you did, I know you're incompetent, and I'm watching you.
And the danger multiplies because of that misinterpretation. The filter takes neutral, everyday interactions, or even genuine offers of support from a friend, and twists them into hidden judgments. Your internal narrative becomes so overwhelmingly loud that it distorts the outside world. It's constantly finding evidence to reinforce your belief that you are broken.
But I mean, if your mind is constantly filtering reality to find attacks, the pressure must become unbearable, and human beings aren't designed to hold on to that level of intense, burning shame indefinitely.
No, we aren't.
It has to go somewhere.
Which moves us into the third part of the cycle.
The shame eventually acts as a pressure valve that bursts. This is the tragedy of the loop reinforcement cycle. The pain seeks an outlet, and the easiest path is to redirect it outward onto others. This is known as blame redirection.
I'm trying to picture the sheer desperation of this moment. It's like carrying a burning hot coal in your bare hands, right? You are in so much agony that without even thinking, you just toss it to the person standing next to you to get a moment of relief. You aren't doing it because you want them to burn. You just want the pain to stop for 1 second.
That captures the lack of malice beautifully. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the victim, who's been judged so relentlessly by society and by their own mind, suddenly begins judging everyone else.
They pass the coal.
Right. They might look at other scam survivors in a support group and think, well, my scammer was incredibly sophisticated, but they're just being greedy with that crypto investment. Or, I was looking for love, but they ignored obvious red flags. Oh, wow. So it's creating this artificial hierarchy of victimhood. Pointing out someone else's supposed flaws temporarily distracts them from their own internalized shame.
Yes, it provides a fleeting, false sense of control. They might also turn this redirection onto their own support network. They become highly critical of the people actively trying to help them, snapping at therapists or alienating friends.
Pushing everyone away.
And in the moment, this outward blame feels entirely justified to them. They think they are just being realistic or holding others accountable, but it leaves the underlying root of their own shame completely unaddressed.
And the collateral damage is immense, because by tossing that hot coal, they destroy the very communities they need to survive. The external blame they received created internal shame, which now turns into external blame directed at their fellow survivors. They end up pushing away the only people who truly understand them.
It acts as a self-destruct sequence for trust. And when a person runs this continuous loop of internal shame and outward blame for long enough, it solidifies. It crystallizes into a permanent state of being that Prof. McGuinness identifies in the text as the victim mentality.
Okay, let's handle this term with immense care, because victim mentality is a phrase that society often weaponizes as an insult.
It is, unfortunate.
I want to assure you, the listener, using this clinical term does not invalidate your experience. The trauma you endured was real, the manipulation was real, and the financial theft was real.
The distinction is vital. The initial harm is unquestionable. What we are discussing now is a specific psychological pattern that develops after the trauma as a maladaptive coping mechanism. It is the state of becoming psychologically trapped in the aftermath.
So what are the actual hallmarks of this pattern? Because it isn't just feeling sorry for yourself, as people dismissively say. It's a complex defensive posture.
One of the core elements is a relentless, persistent focus on the past harm. The victim's attention is entirely anchored on the mechanics of what the scammer did, or how the banking system failed them.
They're stuck in the past.
Exactly. They have virtually no energy left to shift focus to their present-day choices. This is inevitably accompanied by a drastically reduced sense of personal agency, the paralyzing belief that nothing they do today can actually improve their tomorrow.
It also breeds this expectation of unfair treatment, right? Because your trust was exploited so profoundly, your brain just assumes everyone else has a hidden agenda too.
Yes, and you become hyper-defensive to protect this identity of the person who was harmed. Because strangely, that identity feels like the only concrete truth you have left to hold on to.
And that defensiveness leads directly to a phenomenon the article calls conditional openness.
Right. Victims stuck in this mentality will only accept support if it perfectly aligns with their existing worldview. It has to validate their current state of anger or despair. If a recovery program or a support group challenges their beliefs, even if that gentle challenge is biologically necessary for healing, they will reject the help entirely.
So what does this all mean for you? If someone listening is stuck in this defensive identity protection, how do they actually accept help without feeling like they are denying their own trauma?
That is the turning point of recovery. And it requires a complete redefinition of the word accountability.
Okay.
In the context of healing from a scam, accountability is absolutely not about accepting the blame for the crime. You did not ask to be targeted. Accountability is entirely about separating your core identity from the behavior and focusing strictly on the realm of what you can influence moving forward.
So it's essentially drawing a line in the sand between the past and the future. You acknowledge the event, but you refuse to let it dictate your identity.
Yes, it's the conscious movement from a passive state of, look what was done to me, to an active state of, here is how I am choosing to respond to it today. Accountability isn't a punishment you inflict on yourself. It is the ultimate tool of empowerment. It is how you reclaim your agency from the scammer who stole it.
We've thoroughly mapped the trap now. We see how fear turns into blame, how blame becomes internalized shame, how that shame redirects outward, and how the whole cycle locks us in this defensive victim mentality. So how do we dismantle the trap?
Well, the foundation of breaking the cycle, the very first tactical step, is what Prof. McGuinness refers to as reaction interruption.
Which is, at its core, the profound power of taking a pause.
Exactly. When you are triggered, whether it's by a thoughtless comment from your sibling or by your own internal voice telling you you're foolish, your brain's amygdala wants to react immediately based on past trauma. Reaction interruption is the act of forcing a brief conscious space between the trigger and your response.
It's taking a deep breath and keeping your hands in your pockets before you throw that hot coal at somebody else.
Yes. And inside that intentional pause, you must deploy a dual strategy: compassion and boundaries.
This is a tricky balance to strike. Instead of a physical wall, what if we think of this like a really sophisticated digital spam filter on your email inbox?
I like that.
The filter is your boundary. It catches the junk mail, right? The toxic blame from family, the harsh judgments from society. You can open your spam folder and read the subject lines. You can acknowledge, oh, look, another panicked, fearful message from someone who doesn't understand scams. You have compassion for the fact that their fear exists, but you never actually click the link.
You don't let it download.
Exactly. You don't let it infect your mental hard drive.
That is a phenomenal analogy. Compassion is often deeply misunderstood as passivity. People assume that if you're compassionate, you must absorb the harsh words or accept the blame to keep the peace.
Right, like you're being a doormat.
But compassion is simply understanding. It's acknowledging internally this person is lashing out because their illusion of a safe world has been shattered. You do that without ever agreeing with the content of their attack.
You can see the spam for what it is, but you don't let it become your operating system.
And the boundary is what keeps your system clean. The steps from the text are highly practical. You pause. You identify the reality of the psychological situation. You acknowledge their fear internally with compassion. And then you set a clear, simple boundary. You say, I understand you are upset and scared, but I will not allow you to speak to my character that way.
What happens when the spam is coming from inside the house, though? Like, what about when the blame is that internal voice of shame we talked about earlier?
The exact same protocol applies. You pause. You recognize that the internal voice telling you you're an idiot is just a downloaded echo of the external world's fear.
Wow.
You look at that voice with compassion. You say, I hear that I'm hurting right now, but you enforce the spam filter on yourself. You actively replace the absolute identity-based statement with the behavior-based truth. You stop saying, I am broken, and you deliberately say, I was systematically manipulated and I am learning how to protect myself.
And to make sure these new boundaries actually hold, Professor McGuinness points to one final, non-negotiable necessity for recovery, right?
Yes, supportive environments. It is nearly impossible to heal in the exact same toxic environment that is actively making you sick.
Makes sense.
You must consciously choose to engage with communities that provide informed, trauma-aware perspectives. You need environments that model this balance of accountability and respect rather than reaction and judgment. These spaces give you a safe, contained arena to practice your new boundaries.
Okay, let's take a breath and recap the intense journey we've been on today. We started by looking at the harsh external blame victim's face, and we realized it's mostly just a psychological mask for society's fear of contagion.
Right.
We tracked how that external blame sneaks inside the mind, shifting dangerously from, I made a mistake, to, I'm a bad person. We explored the desperate urge to release that pressure by lashing out at fellow survivors. And finally, we learned how to use the pause to build that mental spam filter, observing the world's fear with compassion while ruthlessly enforcing boundaries to reclaim our agency.
It is a profound, life-altering shift from living in reaction to living with intention.
And that brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with, something for you to consider long after this audio ends. If you can master this framework, if you can learn to build a compassionate spam filter against the intense shame of a scam, what else does that unlock for you?
That's a great question.
Think about it. The ability to separate someone else's fear from your own identity isn't just a tool for scam recovery. It is a superpower. If you can survive this and learn how to hold boundaries while maintaining compassion, you suddenly have the exact toolkit needed to navigate toxic workplace dynamics or heal from other unresolved family traumas. The worst thing that happened to you might just forge the armor that makes you unbreakable in every other area of your life.
A truly powerful implication. And remember, you do not have to navigate these muddy waters alone.
Absolutely. As we wrap up today, I want to drop all the analogies and speak to you earnestly and directly from the heart. We want to remind you once again, if you are a victim, it was not your fault and you are not alone. The SCARS Institute is here to help you through this. We invite all scam victims or survivors to join the SCARS Institute Survivors community for support and your recovery. It is free, safe, and completely confidential. Sign up right now at www.scarscommunity.org. And to learn exactly what you need to know today, visit www.scamvictimsupport.org.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for joining us on the SCARS Institute Exploration Podcast. We wish you strength, clarity, and peace on your path forward.
Thank you for listening to our SCARS Institute Audio Exploration Podcast. Remember that this was not your fault, and you are not alone. But right now, there are things you need to know. Start by visiting www.scamvictimsupport.org. This will help you learn the basics that every scam victim and survivor needs to know now. We are here for you. We have created a free, safe, and confidential space just for you. You can learn and recover in the SCARS Institute's Scam Survivors Support and Recovery Community. To sign up, please visit www.scarscommunity.org. Answer a few questions to help us better support you and begin your recovery. This has been another in the SCARS Institute Audio Exploration Podcast series. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe. We wish you all the best, and remember that the SCARS Institute is here to help. This podcast is copyright 2026 by the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, Inc.